James Crystal, welcome to Stay Humble podcast.
Thanks for having me, David.
How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling all right. Yeah, I've been for a run. I've had my breakfast. I'm not feeling too bad. Yeah, it's another day in lockdown.
It sounds a really good start to the morning. And I just wanted you, just for the viewers and the listeners, to just sort of tell you about your story and your background, if you would.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I grew up down south. Great parents, great family. I grew up with ADHD. I was diagnosed when I had a late diagnosis when I was 15. And by this point, I'd been getting into quite a bit of trouble at school throughout my education, really, and a little bit outside of school as well. And I'd kind of started smoking a bit of weed. And by the time I got to the psychologist, my mum took me to the psychologist. He said, "Yeah, you've been self-medicating with cannabis." He said that he'd imagine it would have been calming me down, and so. But anyway, I tried some medication. Put me on Equizim. Did that for about 2 days and absolutely hated it. And decided that I wasn't going to do any medication. I wasn't going to try any prescribed medication. With the ADHD was just something which was kind of, I think my mum had suspected that there was some sort of behavioural issues for a while. But like I say, it was never diagnosed. I think it was quite a new diagnosis anyway at the time. And yeah, I think I was just one of those kids that, when you say, right, don't press that button, don't, you want to press it, you want to find out. I was quite inquisitive. So, when I was told not to do things, I quite often wanted to find out for myself why not, and often people tell you when you're younger, not to do things, which from a teenager or a child's point of view actually seems just like they're being a bit of a spoil sport. Like, it seems like actually that would have been quite fun. Like, why are they telling them not to do it? So I think that was kind of my character kind of growing up, really. And I think it was much not too dissimilar with the whole don't take drugs thing as well. Like we used to have it on the rubbers. I don't know if you used to have it. They might still have it actually. On rubbers, and it says like don't touch drugs. Drugs are bad and things.
No, I don't remember that. I can remember some sports teams having it as sponsorship actually, but yeah, I don't remember the rubber thing. But
we used to have it on rubbers in school, like everywhere. You used to just say, like, it was that talk to Frank. It used to say drugs are bad, like say no to drugs and all this sort of stuff. And it's one of those things. It's like we never had, and the teachers would say it as well. But it's often they'd maybe say something about it. They'd say don't touch drugs. And I think for me, being quite inquisitive, it was like, well, why not? Like, I wasn't really being told why not to touch them. It was like when you asked, they just mutter something about gangs and people dying, and then that was it. Do you know what I mean? So that I never had anyone come into my school when I was young, or come and speak at a youth club and say, this is my story. This is what drugs did to my life. This is why I wouldn't advise you do it, sort of thing like that. So I never had that. So I think it was much similar with kind of say drugs, and so I started smoking cannabis. I think a lot of people around me were kind of smoking it anyway. And so I think it's just one of those conforming, peer pressure and all this sort of stuff. Got diagnosed with ADHD, and then I was kicked out of school when I was 15, shortly after the diagnosis. And it was after that I started kind of partying quite a lot, drinking, and was just surrounding myself with people who were, not positive influences on my life. I probably wasn't a very positive influence on their life either. And I ended up being drugged. I ended up being kidnapped and sexually abused on multiple occasions by an older man who was just always there, just kind of always with us. He was probably nearly 40, and some of the people I was hanging around with were, up to maybe 18, 20, and he was always with one of the older boys. And yeah, he ended up sexually abusing me on multiple occasions, and it was tough. It was a hard thing to have to go through. And it was from there really that I started using harder drugs. I started, committing crime, more serious crime. I started selling drugs as well to kind of feed my habit and feed my lifestyle. And yeah, I think in those moments, when I was abused, I lost my self-confidence. I lost my self-belief, my self-worth. I lost my manhood, dignity, self-respect, self-esteem. It all just completely went out the window, and yeah, it was just a tough thing to have to go through, and the drugs helped, the drink helped, and I just blocked it out and kind of masked it. And so yeah, that was my life for a good few more years, up until I eventually got sent to prison for robbery. And yeah, I mean, looking back, that it saved my life. Getting sent down definitely saved my life. Although I did things that I'm not proud of, it was, that was definitely the thing which stopped me killing myself, through the life I was living. So see that as a blessing now.
Yeah, I feel that's such a deep thing for you to be so open and honest with me in this sort of discussion in terms of what you've been through, in terms of, like, say, you've been, drugged and sexually abused and stuff like that. And, how during that period, was there just no one to turn to in terms of, telling people what had happened or anything like that? You just bottled that up instead of maybe being able to share that.
Definitely bottled it up, mate. Yeah, my girlfriend at the time was the only person that knew for quite a while. The only reason she knew was because she was actually there on one of the occasions that it happened. And he'd been threatening her. I was passed out, and it was crazy. So she kind of knew for a long time, and I didn't even want to admit it to myself. Especially after that first time, I'd been unconscious. My partner was telling me, what had happened, what he'd done to me, and I didn't want to believe it, mate. I was utterly embarrassed and ashamed, and so and it ended up happening a few more times, and I didn't even want to admit it to myself, mate. Let alone talk about it with other people. And so yeah, so it was one of those things that I think by the time my mum and dad found out, my partner told my mum and dad, and they I can't imagine how they felt. Yeah, I think by the time I did start speaking about it, it was it was potentially too late. I'd been bottling it up for too long.
Yeah, and what did your parents say? Did they take any action, or did they just? Was it like you said? It was just too late.
They just didn't understand. They just didn't understand. My parents are incredible. I was at an age where I was just running away from home. I was out of control. So short of my mum and dad locking me in a bedroom, there's nothing, like literally just locking me in a room without windows. There's nothing they could have done to prevent it. So, we haven't really had too many deep discussions about it. But they tried to kind of signpost. They tried to. My dad offered to get me counselling, and I did a bit of counselling, and they just did what they could as parents,
And how did that counselling feel? Did that help any in terms of weight lifted or anything like that, or was it just
not at all, mate? No, not at all. Only because I was just using drink and drugs. I was a drug addict. Yeah, so it didn't help. It didn't help for me. I'm sure if I'd been sober, and I was actually engaging in it, and being honest about everything that had happened, then it would have been a different story. But because of the state I was in, it was pointless, really.
Yeah, and you were obviously using the drugs and the drink to sort of escapism, wasn't it? It sounds like from what you're saying that was what was happening at the time to deal with that.
Yeah, I thought that I'd be able to do that the rest of my life. I never thought I'd have to. I never thought I'd have to kind of face reality. You know what I mean? I thought, I just thought that I could just mask it for the rest of my life and never have to think about it, talk about it, do anything about it. That's what I thought.
And you talked about, obviously, with early on about being in school that you have your ADHD diagnosis. And do you feel, from that, do you feel people should be medicated for ADHD?
I think it's different, isn't it, for each person? I think everyone's body reacts in a different way to medication. It's more the mind really with ADHD medication, isn't it? But yeah, I think for me it was I felt like I was on speed. I felt like I'd just dropped a flipping pill. You know what I mean? It wasn't a nice experience at all. Yeah, I felt like I just dropped the pill and I had everything bar the euphoria. Like, so yeah, so it was, so it just wasn't for me. Like, it wasn't for me. But then saying that, I'd already been self-medicating according to the psychologist. So, perhaps if I had been diagnosed earlier on and I'd taken some medication for it, it might have been a different story. But all I can speak about is for myself and just say, it didn't work for me.
And then on reflection, what do you feel like the schools could have done more to support you in them school settings so that you wouldn't have, for instance, been expelled at 15? Do you think there's more support that the school could have done for you at that time?
I think, I think education really, like, I know it sounds silly, but the school wasn't educated on ADHD at all. And there were probably a handful of us with ADHD, and we all kind of stood out like a sore thumb. So I knew everyone that had ADHD, and it was like a label. It literally was like a label that you wore, and I think people, I know I did, and I know a few of the other boys did, definitely play up to it. Yeah, maybe not consciously, but it doesn't help. When you're kind of almost isolated, from a crowd, I think especially as a young person, you tend to, you want to be seen, and so I think the school at the time just weren't educated on it well enough and how to kind of deal with it. And so I think that's probably the number one, because I think all the people. Most of the boys that had ADHD in my school ended up being expelled.
And that's a shame because, sorry, I was just going to say that's a shame in terms of like that sort of failing them in a sense that they've not been, like, they're going to end up coming out with nothing from school.
Yeah, definitely. It's like, well, if you can't educate this person, then you need to just move them to somewhere where they can be educated, and where they can be, treated, and they can be treated as if they're, like normal, not an anomaly. So yeah, it's just a shame that it comes to expulsion.
Yeah, it does. And for parents as well, what advice would you give to them with children that might have been, who are diagnosed with ADHD? What advice would you give parents, to having stuff to help them?
Yeah, it's a big question, that. I just think take it day by day. I think there's a part of having ADHD where, as I said before, if you're told don't do this, don't do this, don't do that, I think there's a way of disciplining people and raising children with ADHD, which is different to how you'd raise someone without ADHD. And I think for a lot maybe most kids, you could say to them, it's not good to use drugs, or you need to sit still, you need to do your work or whatever. And a lot of kids will be like, all right, cool, that's what I do. I've just been told not to do it. But I think with ADHD, like I said earlier, it's like, don't do this, don't do that, and it feels like I think there's just an inquisition where you want to find out why not, and there's not. It's very hard to say to give advice, from my point of view. But I think not to put too much pressure, and I just think discipline doesn't work in the same way with someone with ADHD as it does with someone without. I guess that's the big thing, working out how you're disciplining and like how strict you're being and things like that.
But do you feel routine would work well?
Yeah, definitely. I think the one thing that I picked up, I was advised by the psychologist, it was either the psychologist or the shrink, to try pick up golf. Yeah, and so I started playing golf, and I was just releasing, any anger that I had on the golf ball. And that really, really helped me. And it also taught me quite a lot of life lessons. It's like, you hit the ball, you want it to go 200 yards dead straight, but it goes like 10 yards, off to the right. And it just taught me that, I've got to, rather than just losing it, snapping your club and, just like kicking the ball or whatever, you've just got to pick up where you left off, and you've got to pick it up and just carry on as best you can. Because, with golf, it's like, you want to get to the pin in 3 shots. Let's say you mess up the first shot. If you just go and kick it or snap a club, your head just goes to your head, and you're never gonna get there in the minimum amount of shots if you lose it. So it's just about trying to stay, calm and collected. And I think that's one thing that golf definitely taught me. That I'll be forever thankful, is to just, whatever happens, to just pick it up where you left off and just try and push forward.
It's interesting that, and I just wanted to go into sort of in terms of your experiences in prison, and I wanted to ask in terms of what are your thoughts on prison reform. I mean, yourself, as an example, you've been to prison and you've come out of it, and you've made some great strides in terms of with Eeverse and stuff like that. I just wanted your opinion and thoughts on prison reform for people.
Yeah, there's a lot of factors. I think if you're in prison and you want to change, in a lot of cases, if you want to change, there is the support that you need, and there are opportunities, but it's not going to be easy. Yeah, it's not going to be easy. There's going to be a lot of work, your end. And I think, for a lot of people, the hardest thing, for me, the biggest thing was changing the people that I surrounded myself with. It says in the Bible, surround yourself with wise people and you become wise. Surround yourself with fools and you suffer harm. And that's just so true, isn't it? For whatever your religion, whoever you are, it's just, the people that you surround yourself with really do, kind of define who you are as well. There's drains, there's radiators. Some people radiate your energy, some people drain your energy. And so for me, the biggest thing there was changing the people that I surrounded myself with. So I stopped surrounding myself with people who were, because I gave up drinking alcohol after I came out. I'm nearly 4 years clean now.
Wow.
And for me, if I was still surrounding myself with people in clubs and in pubs and going out, people who are going out drinking, it would have been a lot harder for me to do that. And so what I'm saying is, it's very, very hard for a lot of people, because some people are raised in families where, drink, drugs, crime, it's just part of their life. It's just part of their lifestyle. And so it's going to be very, very hard for someone to kind of reform, get reformed and rehabilitated when they're still surrounding themselves with those same people. And so how do you say to someone, well, you can't go and say to someone, well, you need to move yourself away from your family.
Mm.
Um,
But you
but
can
yeah, what I'm
change the
saying,
friends, can't you? Like you can just surround yourself. Like I think one of the common thing I read is like you've got to surround yourself with like 6 people that bring sort of the best out of you. They're the sort of the 6 people in your circle are which pretty much influence who you are.
yeah,
Mm.
yeah, exactly. And so what was I saying? Yeah, so I think that's a big thing. I think if people are prepared to put the work in and make sacrifices and draw from the support that's available to them and the resources that are available, I think change is definitely possible. But it's got to be a choice. It's got to be a conscious decision in your heart.
Yeah.
It's not the judge saying, you've got to change, or your probation officer saying, you need to change, or your mum or, a friend saying you've got to change, you're just going to be in prison the rest of your life. Like, ultimately, unless you want to change, you're not going to change.
Yeah. So it's a mindset
And
thing,
so,
isn't it?
yeah, it definitely. So yeah, and I think, for me, I've been very lucky to have found a church, I've found that a community of people and a faith, but a community of people who just love me unconditionally, who support me, who just build me up, rather than tear me down. And I think that, for me, I just feel so lucky and so blessed to have found that, that family, that community, because without them, I wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you. No chance.
And why, I think you've kind of answered this if I'm honest, but I just want to say, like, in terms of those that go in, say, prison with smaller sentences and still in prison because they've ended up getting their sentence extended, or like I said to you before about ex-prisoners coming out and then reoffending again, is it just basically their influence that they're just going back into the same circle of people that they're surrounding themselves and that's what's causing them to reoffend?
There's so many factors, in wintertime, prison system sees a huge intake of prisoners, with very small sentences, relatively small sentences, and that's just purely because people want somewhere to be over Christmas. Some people just want to be around people, maybe people that they know, or you get a lot of homeless people as well at Christmas time, winter time, going into prison just because they get 3 meals a day. They're doing the war, they're medicated and things like this. So it's a habit, isn't it? For a lot of people, it's just a habit. I think I'm very lucky that when I grew up, that wasn't the lifestyle. So I think I knew what was right and wrong when I was growing up. I was taught well, but I speak to people. I've spoken to a few people who have come out and they've changed their lives. And I spoke to someone last week who his family are heavily involved in crime, but he's managed to come out and he actually found faith and he's just completely turned his life around. And it's just incredible. It's incredible to see. So yeah.
And I've heard on a previous podcast about how in prison that you sort of created the idea for Eeverse, which you're showing obviously with your hat and your branding in terms of your t-shirt. Where did that you get that idea and passion that you wanted to create that brand?
Yeah, I was on recall actually for bad behaviour. I hadn't actually committed a crime. I'd been sent back to finish my license for missing a couple of probation appointments. And so I think I was already in a place where I'd matured a lot, and I knew that I knew that I was going to turn my life around. I knew that I wasn't going to go back to crime. And yeah, I just had the vision. I had the vision for I wanted to lead people for good and influence people for good. And so yeah, my dream for Eeverse was to be able to create a brand which represented reversing a negative into a positive, which is why it's Eeverse and why it's the two E's reversed. And that was really that was really how it started. I wrote my first kind of like business plan in prison and designed my first logo. And yeah, I guess it's just something that I had that dream whilst I was there, and I've just pursued ever since, really.
And then how did the events company evolve as well? Like, can you tell me more about that in terms of the events that you've been doing?
Yeah, well, it was actually only one so far because of COVID. We started March last year. Was the first event, and we haven't been able to put any more on since. But yeah, it was. I want to be able to with the clothing. Clothing is great, and it's a great way of being able to kind of raise awareness and hopefully start conversations further down the line. Lots of conversations. But I also thought I want to be able to help kind of educate people on different ways to improve their mental health as well, and not from me, of course, but from professionals, from specialists, psychologists, and also mix that in with real life stories as well. People who have experienced mental health and have potentially come out the other side, or people who have got great tips. And so I wanted to do that through events, and it's just also a great way to be able to raise money for for charities working on the front line. So I think rather than just giving the money straight to charity, it's like, well, we put in what we put into the last event, we got double out for charity. Yeah. So if we were to put that money in, straight to charity, it would have been half as much money, and we wouldn't have been able to do the good work, the education, the prevention through the event.
And let's hope, like say, events do come back. Obviously, later on this year, hopefully things will be lifted, so you can put on more events to do that work in terms of helping people with mental health, and obviously the charities as well. And I just wanted to ask about. So I looked on your LinkedIn, and one of the I wanted to ask, was it a surreal moment for you when you got the opportunity to talk to like the Commonwealth and Development Officer on World Mental Health Day?
Yeah, it was actually. It was. It was. Yeah, it was. Yeah, it was. I got actually recommended by the Bank of England to speak at the Foreign Office, and I couldn't believe it. I really couldn't believe it. It's just it just shows that anything's possible. And for me, I believe anything's possible through God, but anything's possible. And yeah, I just felt very humbled and very, very, very fortunate and blessed to be given the opportunity to kind of share my story. And yeah, at the Foreign Office, we so many conversations were started about alcohol and the links between addictions and mental health, and we got so many people talking, and it was just an amazing feeling. A lot of people messaging in saying, I'm going to make real changes to my lifestyle after hearing this. And I think for me, that's just the biggest blessing in the world, being able to, I say it every time, being able to use my darkness from yesterday to make other people's tomorrow brighter is an amazing thing. And it's just something which I'll be eternally grateful for.
I can imagine. I think that's some awesome feedback for yourself. Could you imagine that 5 years ago?
No, never. No. I mean, I had no hope five years ago. I had no hope in myself, and I don't think really anyone really had hope. I hadn't met people that saw potential in me, and no, I could never have imagined that, mate. Never.
Yeah. And what are the plans for the future for Eeverse? What's the future looking like post COVID, or just stuff like that?
I guess it's trying to develop a more like a larger brand, eventually a globally recognized brand, which is known for advocating for mental health. We've got all these big brands advocating for physical health, which is great, but there's not a go-to brand that you just think of as soon as you think of mental health, like globally. And so I guess that would be my dream, and just to be able to raise millions of pounds for charity, and be able to educate people and just inspire hope to people who are in desperate situations. And so yeah, I guess, but I think short term I need to find a bit more time, because obviously I'm studying full time in my third year of business studies at uni now. So first of all, I need to find more time to put into it, or it's not going to grow.
Yeah. But that's awesome that you've like kind of gone sort of developing yourself further, obviously with the university and stuff. I mean, imagine that was something as well, like 5 years ago, that you would maybe never expected yourself to go and do.
And I never thought I'd do university. Obviously, I haven't been in education since I was 15, so nearly 10 years when I started studying again. But yeah, it was something, I'd spoken at a Conservative conference a few years ago, and I'd said to a couple of the MPs that I was going to go to uni and I was going to go and get a degree and stuff. And I don't think they really believed me. I don't really think that they'd met many people who had come out of prison and got a degree. And so I was just like, well, look, it's possible. It definitely is possible, and I'm going to prove it to you. And I'm still in touch with a couple of them, and I've said, when I've got the degree, I'll come into Parliament and I'll show you that it's possible, and we'll put a plan together to help more people go down the same route.
No, that's awesome. I've had experience of that where I've been told by teachers and stuff that I'd never go to university, and sort of it's just that sort of when someone tells you you can't do something, you want to prove them right. So I hope you do that. And I wanted to ask in terms of just a bit of advice for people. I know the last year has been very difficult. I mean, we're coming up to almost a year now of lockdowns and restrictions and stuff. What is your advice to people, like how to have dealt with that? Like, I mean, obviously coming from experience of being in prison, how did you sort of deal with them sort of restrictions and stuff? And what would you advise people to help deal with that?
I think the first thing is just taking it day by day. I think that's massively important, and then not putting too much pressure on yourself to achieve this or achieve that, because sometimes some days that I'm massively productive, and then there's other days that I'm just productivity is minus, and I just beat myself up about that, and I get quite anxious about it, and so I think try and take it day by day. Try not to put too much pressure or expect too much from yourself. Probably firstly, and I guess just trying to salvage some sort of sense of normality, in lockdown, but trying to speak to as many people as you can. They say we're allowed to go for a walk with one person. Well, go and do that. Go and do that as many times as you can, and just trying to salvage some sort of sense of normality. I think that's very important. I find it very helpful to write a list down of the things that I want to achieve in the day. I say to myself at the beginning of the day, if I can achieve this, and this, that'll be a good day. So I find that very helpful. That keeps me kind of centered, and it keeps me aligned with what I want to achieve. And I think another big thing is trying to try something new, like picking up a new hobby, or learning something different. I think that's been a big thing. I've started properly cooking. A few years ago, I used to eat out. Every single meal it would be eaten out, and I could cook like pasta and cheese and toast and things like that. But now I'm pretty nifty chef. So and I've found a lot of joy in it, and I'm quite proud of my achievements. So that I think that boosts your confidence as well, doesn't it? So
it does, yeah.
I'd definitely say that trying to find a new hobby or learning a new skill set.
Yeah, they all sound really good bits of advice. And I'd like to just ask a couple final questions for you. And the first one is, what does it mean for you to be human?
Gosh, I think as life goes on, it's learning to kind of normalize normal human emotions. Yeah, and just kind of, we have all these different emotions, which when we experience them, often we don't understand. It can make us feel very, very sad, or worried, or we don't understand why we feel like it. But yeah, I think just normalizing those normal human emotions is very, very important. But I think for me, it's about charity. What can I give to other people? Not in terms of finances, but just what can I give? What can I give this world? Whether it just be a little bit of kindness or some inspiration or some motivation. How can I try and make the world a better place? And when I don't say, I hear people say, what gets them out of bed in the morning is, making the world a better place. I'll be honest with you, mate, that's the last thing I'm thinking about when my alarm's going off. But I want to know when I rest my head on my pillow at night that I've done my best to make someone's world better, or make the world a better place in some small way. And so I think really that's, for me, what being human's about.
They're really good points then. And finally, I'd like to ask you, what keeps you to stay humble?
Just reminding myself, mate, of where I've been. I do this on a daily basis. I remind myself of, where I was, 3 years ago, where I was sleeping over 18 hours every single day, and I was extremely depressed. I didn't leave my bedroom. I was in a very, very dark place. Curtains drawn, wasn't answering the phone to anyone, wasn't going out. I remind myself of that. I remind myself of a year or two previous to that when I was in prison. I remind myself of a few years before that when I was, heavily addicted to Class A drugs. And I remind myself, of a year before that when I was, sexually abused, and all of these memories, reminding myself of, all the mistakes I've made, and where life was, at its worst. Definitely keeps me humble and just grateful, and also helps me to get through, situations from day to day when I feel sad, I can kind of look back and say, but look where you've come from, look where you were, look where you are now.
Yeah, they sound really powerful to be able to reflect back and think of how far you've come, and I think that's really, really great to hear that from you. And I just want to give you, James, a platform now just to sort of, where can people sort of check out, Eeverse and yourself and stuff like that, sort of where the links to find them.
Yeah, thanks, mate. Social media is Eeverse UK, so it's EEVERSE UK. Website eeverse.co.uk. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram. LinkedIn is James Crystal. And yeah, I mean, t-shirts. The t-shirts are all ethically made. They're all sustainably made. They're eco-friendly. They're vegan friendly. Mate, they're so soft. They're just so soft, and they're creating positive change for people and the planet. They're very good. They're good to the planet. So yeah, get yourself a t-shirt, helping to raise money for charity and help raise awareness. And yeah, and if anyone ever wants to reach out and ask me any more questions, anything I can do to help, then yeah, don't be afraid to hit me up.
Yeah, and I will be putting them in the podcast notes as well for you, so like people can search for them as well, so they'll be obviously included. So, but I just want to thank you for your time and being able to be so open with your story of what how far you've come in, like certainly even like say the last 5 years or through your life, being able to be so open about what's happened and discuss that with me. I'm like really grateful. I'm sure listeners and viewers will be really interested in your story, James.
Thanks for reaching out.
No problem. Thank you for staying humble.
It's been a pleasure.